일요일날 6시 6분이 지나고 있습니다. 이제 뉴욕타임즈 스크랩 해놓은 게 있는데 중거충 한번 읽겠습니다. The Allies, 이제 수요일 날짜입니다. The Allies in battling free trade. A surprising friendship has made Trump's global trade policies quite durable. They met in the 1990s at an event about the North American Free Trade Agreement, where they were the only people arguing against it. He was a conservative trade lawyer who filed anti-dumping cases on behalf of American steel companies and predicted that the treaty would hurt American jobs. It did. She was a liberal activist with a consumer advocacy organization who organized protests featuring giant puppies. Her worry was that NAFTA's rules would hurt working people and override U.S. legal standards on food safety and the environment. They did. These two had something else in common. Both had grown up in Midwestern towns that suffered when manufacturing moved overseas. She hailed from Wausau, Wisconsin, where her family had run a scrap yard. He grew up in Asabula, Ohio, and his father put himself through college by working in a steel mill. After that first meeting, they kept in touch, swapping notes on how to throw sand in the gears of a free trade machine that seemed unstoppable. 30 years later, this unlikely friendship between Bob, Donald Trump's U.S. Trade Representative, and Lori, director of the Rethink Trade Program at the American Economic Liberties Project, a nonprofit research and advocacy group, continues, and it played a role in bringing about one of the biggest shifts in U.S. trade policy in decades, the astonishing reversal of U.S. support for the international trading system that the American officials had long championed. Sam Spade, with more miles on him, London. In a new show, Clive Owen praised the detective who's retired and living in France. In an early scene in Monsieur Spade, a new 6-part series from AMC, the American detective Sam Spade, played by Clive Owen, is lying on his side, grimacing as a doctor examined his nasal regions. Best prostate of the morning, the doctor said cheerfully, snapping up his rubber gloves. Then he motioned Spade to his office to tell him he has emphysema and must stop the smoking. Spade, the beheaded and inscrutable hero of Dashiell Hamas at the novel, the Maltese at the Falcon, getting a prostate check, and the quitting smoking. At the time, there was tension and a dark cloud over France. Frank said it raised the question, who is French and who isn't. And then we have Sam Spade wrestling with his identity, his old life, his new life. I didn't get to wear the hat that much, though. The relationship between Spade and the adolescent Teresa, who has grown up at the convent, is the emotional heart of the tale. By American, easier said than done. Book review. Making it in America, the almost impossible quest to manufacture in the USA, and how it got that way. Is it possible to buy American in an age of offshoring? And is that the right goal for workers, consumers, or the planet? The journalist Rachel explores this question in Making It in America, which takes as a case study one small clothing manufacturer in Maine. Slade followed Ben and Whitney Waxman, who in 2015 founded American Roots with the goal of not only manufacturing in the United States, but also operating with an entirely domestic supply chain. Free trade, Slade contends, has caused a massive upward transfer of wealth and rendered the United States unable to make what we need. After 3 decades, she writes, American consumers now find themselves in a dire situation. They are dependent on other nations to provide the bulk of their basic needs: medicines, technology, vehicles, energy, furniture, and of course the clothing. But there are questions that should be asked of U.S. factories too. Throughout Making It in America's, Slade applies a U.S.-centric analysis to free trade, considering it in terms of its impact on America's labor market. She also seemed to assume that buying American equate to buying ethically, but if the garment industry were to return to the United States at scale, it would probably more closely resemble the industry we currently have than the Waxman's business. It's by confronting the limitations of the materials and the current processes that you put yourself in a position to come up with the breakthroughs that will define the future. It's perhaps the best reason there is for making things. Blacklisted screenwriter who fled Hollywood. Norma the Badgeman, a screenwriter who moved to Europe in the late 1940s rather than be subject to the congressional investigation and professional ostracism that overtook her industry for a decade, died on December 17th at a home in Beverly Hills, California. She was 103 and widely considered to be one of the last surviving victims of the Hollywood blacklist. Her daughter Sujo confirmed the death. That fall, the House Committee on American Activities called a group of screenwriters, directors, and producers to testify about their connections to the Communist Party. 10 of them refused to answer questions, and each was later found in contempt. Though the Badgemans were not among that group. which came to be called the Hollywood 10. They feared they would be subpoenaed soon. A few weeks after the hearings, a group of Hollywood executives released the so-called Word of the Statement, which declared that the 10 witnesses, as well as anyone else who refused to discuss a relationship to the Communist Party, would be blacklisted from the industry. Another friend, Sophia, pinched my cheek one day and called me a la mama, which drove me wild. She said in an interview for the book Tender Comrade, a backstory of the Hollywood Blacklist, 1997, by Patrick and the Poor. By the time the Budgemans returned to Hollywood in the 1970s, the film industry and the community around it had changed significantly, and they never managed to restart their careers. She worked as a features writer for the Los Angeles Examiner while taking courses in screenwriting at the School for Writers, which was later added to the federal government's list of subversive organizations. A tennis hothead desperately searching for peace. Andre is the worst and all the time, and he's a battle poet. There's a tennis player you probably don't pay much attention to, though perhaps that you should. It's not because he narrowly escaped being the victim in a huge upset on day one of the Australian Open, surviving a fifth set at the tiebreaker when all appeared lost. He's not the next big thing. At 26, he's too old for that. His game is hardly the most sublime, telepathic forehand, though he may never win a Grand Slam event. And yet, you still ought to pay attention to Andre of Russia, because chances are he's you. You get mad with yourself, then you get mad because you got mad with yourself. It's like a snowball that starts to be bigger and bigger, getting upset with yourself because you know you are not supposed to. Trump's enduring strength is his ties to voters. News analysis. Rivals didn't come close to breaking that bond in the Iowa caucus. I know that he is picked by God for this hour. There are things that he has done in the past, but we all have a past. Bill Clinton once explained America's two political parties by saying that Democrats want to fall in love while Republicans want to fall in line. That adage has not withstood the Trump era. Today, it is Republicans who are besotted. Donald J. Trump's decisive victory in the Iowa caucuses on Monday revealed a new depth to the reservoir of devotion inside his party. For 8 years, he had nurtured a relationship with his supporters with little precedent in politics. He validated them, he entertains them, he speaks for them, and he used them for his political and legal advantage. This connection, a hard-earned bond for some, a cult of personality, yet to others, had unleashed one of the most durable forces in American politics. Iowa Republicans, following the lead of party officials across the country, rallied behind the former president despite a list of reasons to reject him. Republicans lost control of the presidency, the Senate, and the House during his 4 years in office. He failed to deliver Republican wave of victories he promised in the 2022 midterms. He has been charged with 91 felonies in 4 criminal cases this past year. A lot of the people that support Donald Trump really are fed up with democracy, representative democracy. They think that an authoritarian-style government would probably be preferable at this point in order to save the nation or whatever, said former Representative Charles, a New Hampshire Republican who previously voted for Mr. Trump but said he would not do so again. I don't think they feel threatened by having somebody who at least has trappings of being more authoritarian than past the president. The state voters tend to be more moderate and less religious, suggesting an opening for her. I know that he's picked by God for this hour, said the P on Iowa caucus score, who spoke in support of Mr. Trump on Monday night. There are things that he has done in the past, but we all have a past. He's a unicorn in our party. Mr. K said Republicans have become more populist and anti-establishment, but that doesn't mean the party will nominate the Major Taylor or Jim Jordan next. There's no going back to the old party. I know that he's picked by God for this hour. There are things that he has done in the past, but we all have a past. A comeback fueled by college-educated Republicans. Working-class voters delivered the Republican Party to Donald J. Trump. College-educated conservatives may ensure that he keeps it. Often overlooked in an increasingly blue-collar party, voters with college degrees remain at the heart of the lingering Republican Cold War over abortion, foreign policy, and cultural issues. These voters, who have long been more skeptical of Mr. Trump having quietly powered his remarkable political recovery inside the party, a turnaround over the past year that has notably coincided with the cascade of 91 felony charges in 4 criminal cases. Then came Mr. Trump's resurgence, in which he rallied every corner of the party, including the white working class, but few closer section of Republicans rebounded as much as college-educated conservatives. A review of state and national polls during the past 14 months shows there are Fox News viewers who are coming back around to him, said David, a Republican operative in Iowa. With 3 decades of experience in campaign politics, These voters are smart enough to see the writing on the wall that Trump is going to win and essentially want to get this over with and send him off to battle Biden. The backlash from Republican voters was immediate. Other surveys have found similar trends. This month, the same pollster showed Mr. Trump with support from 62% of Republican voters, including 60% of those with a college degree. Mr. Trump's backing from white, college-educated Republicans doubled to 60% over the course of last year, according to Fox News polling. Mr. Trump's ability to maintain support from both sides of the party's educational gap could be crucial to his political future beyond the Republican primary. In the 2020 presidential election, he bled support from 9% of Republicans who voted for different candidates, according to an AP VoteCast survey of more than 110,000 voters. Some campaign advisors have said those defections cost him a second term, particularly given that Joseph R. Biden Jr. lost just 4% of Democrats. College-educated voters accounted for 56% of Mr. Trump's defection, according to a New York Times analysis of the data. If we are going off the way polls are right now, that's the way I feel. My vote would be going into thin air. Mr. Assad said the country was really running smooth under him. Full employment is good for society. Here's proof. On the day of 1968, when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, he was in Memphis to show support for striking sanitation workers. By then, he had come to see fighting for economic equality as a crucial part of the struggle for civil rights. Unfortunately, there was little progress on that front for the next half-century. By many measures, the economic divide between black and white Americans was as wide in the late 2010s as it was in the late 1960s. The good news, over the past few years, we've seen a significant decline in equality on multiple dimensions, including a narrowing of the gap between black and white Americans. Over the past few years, America had seen a significant decline in inequality on multiple dimensions, including a narrowing of the gap between blacks and white. Which brings us to the surprising progress of the past few years. Whenever I write about the good economic news of 2023, our remarkable success in sharply reducing inflation without a surge in unemployment, I get two kinds of pushback. Most of that pushback comes from Republicans, 3/4 of whom say that it was a bad or terrible year for the country, even though almost 70% of them say that it was okay or better for them personally. But I also get pushback from some on the left who insist that our so-called recovery helped only the rich and did nothing for ordinary families. This is completely wrong. I've written about work by David Autor, and A. Macro, showing that the post-COVID economic recovery has produced especially large wage gains at the lower portion of the scale, compressing the wage distribution. Wages in America are still highly unequal, but not as unequal as they were just a few years ago. In fact, they found we've reversed almost 40% of the rise in one key measure of inequality that took place during the Great Income Divergence from 1979 to 2019. And because of the lower overall inequality, disproportionately has the Black Americans. One aspect has been a historic reduction in racial wage disparities. D posted on social media. There are many things we still need to do to fulfill King's vision, and some of them will be hard. But one thing that should be relatively easy is providing an economy in which Americans who are willing to work, which means a great majority of adults can find jobs. How Trump's opponents made Iowa easy for him. It's absurd that there are no unified opposition candidate again. Donald Trump's victory in the Iowa caucuses was resounding enough to make the race for the Republican nomination look essentially finished at the start, but it wasn't resounding enough to remove the sense that it could have been otherwise, that yet again his opposition within the Republican Party made things ridiculously easy for his candidacy. Trump is essentially running an incumbent's campaign, presenting himself as the default leader of the party. Declining to debate, rolling up the endorsement, but his opponent combined it appears for reasonably close to 50% of the caucus vote, and for the normal incumbent, losing almost half the vote in an early state would be a sign of danger, weakness, and disarray. So if the two anti-Trump candidates could converge that much on the issues despite their different constituencies, even in a debate they spent hammering at each other, it doesn't seem that hard to imagine a single candidate running a unifying, not Trump aging campaign. But then you should also blame Tim Hardy, not her voters so much as the big donors who sustained her and the right-of-center media figures who have spent the past few months boosting her, for going all in on a candidate who clearly has less of a chance of winning a head-to-head battle with Trump than even the disappointing version of DeSantis. Now, exactly that implausible strategy elevating Harley over DeSantis will probably define the New Hampshire primary. It's her best and only shot to become the not Trump again standard bearer, and to prove my skepticism wrong. But it's more likely that every New Hampshire voter who picks her as their not Trump the option, just making Trump's path to victory easier than it had to be. The miseducation of Nikki Haley, what segregation academies had taught the governor of South Carolina and me about the slavery. After failure to identify slavery as the cause of the Civil War generated a wave of criticism last month, Nikki Haley assured her potential constituents that she had black friends and that she understood the war's origin. She said that in South Carolina, literally in second and third grade, you learn about the slavery. Conveniently producing black friends is, alas, not surprising, but claiming she learned that the Civil War was a battle over slavery in second and third grade years. Ms. Harley attended a segregation academy, a type of private school established in the years after the U.S. Supreme Court's 1954 decision in Brown v. Board of Education by white parents who did not want their children attending school with black children. By 1975, the number of private schools in South Carolina grew more than tenfold, enrolling as many as 90% of the white children in some major black counties. The Supreme Court eventually ruled that discrimination on the basis of race wasn't legal at private school either, but even today, many segregation academies remain overwhelmingly white. When I was at Edgewood, there were no AP classes, no college test prep, and no real expectation that any of us would go to college unless we really wanted to, which for the girl would be largely to find the husbands. The science teachers taught us creationism, and the principal used a big wooden paddle on misbehaving students, no matter how young or old they were. I don't know which textbook the Miss Harley's school used, but I know just by virtue of the fact that she attended a segregation academy that the understanding of the Civil War was shaped by white teachers and administrators who were not inclined to grapple with the evils of slavery. My view is more optimistic. I don't need to believe that America is unblemished and inherently good to believe in its potential and its ability to be better and stronger. If we cannot or will not do the sometimes uncomfortable work of reckoning with our past, America's destiny is small, mean, and weak. Unwillingness to tell the truth about the past serves only a shrinking number of Americans who wish to live within the distorted understanding of the world that segregation academies created for their students. Un-America only for some and with a very limited future. Uncertainty is not the disaster you may fear. It's harder than ever to predict the future. There should be a positive to embrace. A close friend told us that getting married in the pandemic summer of 2021. We can invite friends to the wedding in order to keep it small and safe. My parents told me, but she did invite the friends. I learned from a Facebook post, just not me, feeling humiliated. I initially kept quiet, but being together grew awkward, and I sensed a growing distance. And when I tried to discuss the widening rift, she called a pause in our relationship by text and stopped reaching out for a year. Tolerating and even delighting in uncertainty does merely help us to accept life's unpredictability. It also readies us to learn and adapt. Each day, the brain uses honed mental models about how the world works, which are used to process a shifting environment. When we meet something unexpected, a neural prediction error signals are mismatched between what we assumed would occur and what we senses tell us. In Dr. D's study, participants who completed the program suffered significantly less depression, gains that held even a year later, and their levels of both worry and anxiety fell to amounts typically experienced by people in the general population. For Dr. D and others, the future of this work lies beyond just taming our dread or not knowing, as important as that is, and in recognizing uncertainty can strengthen our thinking. It is, as the National Cancer Institute senior scientist Paul says, all about the resetting our expectation of what knowledge is, and about developing a culture of uncertainty tolerance, where the open-mindedness, flexibility, and the curiosity offered by being unsure are prized. Dr. Han, who studies uncertainty in medicine, is working with Norwegian colleagues to train medical students and physicians to leverage uncertainty. And heart being unsure demand a crucial admission. The world is the world. The world is unpredictable, dynamic, and flawed, and so are we. It's an approach that recognizes that the strengths of knowledge and of our own mind drive from its very mutability. It's a realm of a second chance. Have companies pulled back from diversity efforts as initiatives face attack? Some businesses are changing their approach. Jay's diversity. Jolie Emerson's diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy paradigm works with more than 500 companies. The growing backlash against the DEI, she said, is usually the first agenda item on every call. The economy and the political landscape have changed since 2022-20 when companies hired DEI officers in droves amid a racial reckoning after the murder of George Floyd. In a Pew of the survey last year, 78% of workers who identified as Democrats agreed with this sentiment, while just 30% of Republican workers thought the same. The pushback may have prompted a rebranding, according to DEI professional, as some companies what used to be called a DEI survey may now be advertised as a culture survey, Ms. is said, or management of the training once framed as a part of DEI efforts may instead be discussed as a cost to help the managers deliver performance reviews more effectively. This term seems to be pretty widely misunderstood in ways that I don't think any of us realized until the past couple of months. Ms. E said of DEI. She added that it might make sense for companies to be far more specific about exactly what it's that we are talking about. But the plunge in DEI job postings could signal a retreat. After a spike in 2020 and 2021, job posts for DEI roles on the employment website, Chip the Recruiter, and indeed dropped in 2022 and 2023, the company said. There is also evidence that companies remain committed to DEI. In a survey released recently by the employment law firm Littler, only 1% of the 320 C-suite executives said they had significantly decreased their DEI commitments in the past year, and 57% said they had expanded those efforts. Does it matter how companies talk about the DEI? Executives have stopped discussing their sustainability efforts and using the term ESG for environmental, social, and corporate governance issue as the topic had become more politicized. To others, changing the word is itself a retreat. We needed to call it what it is, said Mr. G. Indeed, the data says that all of these positive things happen when you have diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we are not going to mask it or call it something different. Case could shift power from agencies to judges. I can see why this case is such a political thing, but to me, it's not political. This is my livelihood. Supreme Court to hear a plea that could overturn pattern of U.S. governance. On a blustery fall morning in southern New Jersey, the weather was too rough for the precinct vote at the center of a momentous Supreme Court case to set out to sea. A heading fisherman named Bill talked about the case, which will be argued on Wednesday, and could both lift what he said was an onerous fishing regulation and wipe out the most important precedent on the power of executive agencies, a long-sought goal of the conservative legal movement, as workers cleaned squid and the salted air whipped over the docks. Mr. B, who has been fishing over 40 years and whose family-owned company is one of the plaintiffs, said he recognized the impact the case could have. I can see why this case is such a political thing, he said, but to me it's not political. This is my livelihood. The modern conservative attack on Chevron is supported, say, it's an attack on regulation and on the expertise and independence of administrative agencies. I don't want to do away with the observer program, he said. I would just like to maintain what we are doing without additional cost. A familiar threat, the cheap Chinese import. Major U.S. investment in high-tech factories and clean energy are at risk. The Biden administration has begun pumping more than $2 trillion into the U.S. factories and the infrastructure, investing huge sums to try to strengthen American industry and fight the climate change. But the effort is facing a familiar threat, a surge of low-priced products from China that is drawing the attention of President Biden and his aides, who are considering new protectionist measures to make sure American industries can compete against Beijing. U.S. factories prepare to produce electric vehicles, semiconductors, and solar panels. China is flooding the market with similar goods, often at significantly lower prices than those of American competitors. A similar influx is also hitting the European market. American executives and officials argue that China's action violate the global trade rules. The concerns are bringing new calls in America and Europe for higher tariffs on Chinese imports, which could escalate what is already a contentious economic relationship between China and the West. Experts say that China could become the world's largest maker of semiconductor chips in the next decade. China's hefty investment in semiconductors, including a new $40 billion fund to support the industry, are also worrying companies investing in new chip facilities. China accounted for a small share of global chip production, only about 7% in 2022, but experts say that the country is spending more on its semiconductor industry than the United States and Europe combined, and that it could become the world's largest maker of chips in the next decade. Then the vice chair of the research firm Tech Insight said the fear was that China would do with the semiconductors what it did with the shipping. Solar cells will still build up excess capacity and then drive foreign competitors out of business. It is a legitimate fear because the weakness of Western companies is they have to be profitable, he said. The United States can and does impose tariffs on Chinese exports that are unfairly subsidized or sold in the American market for less than it costs to make them. As a part of the climate law that Mr. Biden signed in 2022, buyers of electric vehicles that are primarily sourced and assembled in the United States rather than China will also receive lucrative tax credits. Still, some officials worry that Chinese vehicles are, in general, so much cheaper than American alternatives that consumers may choose to buy them anyway. From notorious boxer to celebrity celeb smokable flower. Mike Tyson's arrival in cannabis at the market is a part of a star trend. On a recent weekend, fans of Mike Tyson, one of the greatest boxers ever, lined up by the hundreds at dispensaries in New York for a chance to meet him and to support his latest business move, selling weed in his home state. With the recent release of his Tyson 2 line, Mr. Tyson 57 has become the most visible newcomer of the celebrity wave in the state's cannabis industry. Although actors, athletes, and musicians have been cashing on with product lines and endorsement deals over the last decade as legalization has swept the United States. The tide is just rising in New York, and Mr. Tyson is one of the biggest names yet to test how far fame can carry a brand in a market that is shaping up to be one of the largest and the most competitive in the world. He said his goal was to solidify his legacy as a trailblazer in cannabis. That's more important to me than making money, he said. Their real power isn't just in sales figure. Mr. L said, it's in how they can change the game about what people think about the cannabis and the influence market dynamics and even potentially influence legislation. Even high-profile politicians have joined the industry as advisors, investors, and lobbyists. In 2018, John, the Ohio Republican who once served as Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, joined the board of Acreage Holding, a multi-state cannabis company with 4 medical dispensaries in New York. Mr. Beef, who was firmly against legalizing cannabis during his 12 terms in Congress, said it was time for a shift in federal policy. At the time, such a change would have netted him a $20 million payday.